Google is one of the biggest and most powerful corporations on the planet, with access to almost all information on the internet.
This also means they have the power to decide what we can and cannot see. And today, we'll be talking about what we cannot.
A Russian app called the Smart Voting app was removed from Google Play on September 17th of 2021. Smart Voting was an app created by Alexei Navalny, an anti-corruption activist, lawyer, and eventual political prisoner in Russia, who mysteriously died in 2024 while in prison on extremism charges. He and his team had created the app for Russian voters to pick candidates who had the best chance of defeating those backed by the ruling party, United Russia, which Alexei described as a party of, quote, crooks and thieves. The app was a strategy to consolidate the opposition vote. In September of 2021 though, right before the Russian parliamentary elections, the Russian government demanded that Google remove the Smart Voting app from its Play Store. They threatened Google with legal consequences and even arrests of local employees if they didn't comply. So Google caved to their demands and removed the app from the Play Store. Now, a year before Navalny had come out with this app, he was hospitalized after being poisoned by a nerve agent. Then, after being imprisoned on highly suspicious embezzlement charges, the Russian prison service comes out saying that he died after taking a walk and complaining about feeling ill earlier in the morning. Highly suspicious indeed.
If you were to hop on Google Earth, type in 2207 Seymour Avenue, and then turn on Street View, you would be greeted with an image of a blurred house located on a seemingly unassuming street. But there's a reason behind Google's decision to restrict users from viewing the home, and that is because it once belonged to a very bad man named Ariel Castro, who between 2002 and 2004 plucked 3 young women from the roads of Ohio and imprisoned them in that very home until he was arrested in 2013. Castro's first victim, Michelle Knight, was taken on August 23rd of 2002. On April 21st of 2003, Castro took his second victim, Amanda Berry, and on April 2nd of 2004, he captured his fourth, Gina De Jesus. For over a decade, he tormented and violated all 3 of the women, and even impregnated one, all while he was pretending to aid in the search of his captives alongside his fellow neighbor. On May 6th of 2013, Amanda managed to escape Castro's home and contact the police. He was arrested that same day. Castro was charged with 4 counts of forcible confinement and 3 counts of violation. However, he pled guilty to 937 counts of violation as well as aggravated killing, which I can't get into because of YouTube guidelines. For his crimes, he was sentenced to life in prison plus 1,000 years without the possibility of parole, but he got off easy as just 1 month into his life sentence, Castro took his own life inside of his prison cell.
So this should be obvious, but you won't find anything from the dark web using Google, which is totally fair. The dark web is the dark underbelly of the internet that many of us just have no desire to explore. We've all heard the legends though about all the stuff you can buy, which is pretty much everything. You can buy illicit substances, weapons, people, you can hire people to kill other people. It's just not a very fun place. And that's all I gotta say about that.
Alright, we've talked about what you cannot Google, now let's discuss what you should not Google, especially when your name is Brian Walsh and you've just killed your wife. Let's get into this man's search history. How long before a body starts to smell? How to stop a body from decomposing. How to embalm a body. 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. How long for someone to be missing to inherit. Can you throw away body parts? What does formaldehyde do? How long does DNA last? Can identification be made on partial remains? I'm not done. Dismemberment and best ways to dispose of a body. How to clean BLOOD from a wooden floor. Luminol to detect BLOOD. What happens when you put body parts in ammonia? Is it better to throw crime scene clothes away or wash them? Hacksaw. Can you be charged for killing without a body? And can you identify a body with broken teeth? Yeah, he really searched up all of those things. But to make matters even worse, Walsh made every single one of those searches on his son's iPad. Now, the Brian Walsh case is actually an ongoing case. His wife Anna was killed in 2003, so unfortunately I cannot yet say that Brian has been thrown into a cell and that the guards have thrown away the key, but I've got a pretty good feeling we all know how this trial is going to end.
Demonic entities that rip the insides out of their still living victims, spread disease, and cause night terrors.
These are some of the most terrifying demons from around the world you'll be praying you never come face to face with.
Who do you have to blame when you're sick? Other than the person who got you sick, that is. Well, if you know anything about ancient Sumerian mythology, and like blaming demons for your problems, then a sag may be responsible for your 14th trip to the toilet in the span of a day. A sag is a pretty nasty demon, said to cause sickness. He's a hideous creature born from the underworld. So busted looking is he that his presence alone is said to make fish in the rivers boil, and one glimpse at the entity can cause people to fall sick and die on the spot. What's worse is that he doesn't come alone. He has an entire army of demonic offspring at his back. But how did he manage to procreate, being that people can't even look at him without dropping dead? Well, a sag didn't make love with people, he had his offspring with the mountains themselves, all the mountains in the world. So his sons and daughters are part hideous demon, part hideous rock creature.
If you've ever seen Game of Thrones, I have a feeling you're gonna like this next one. It's called a Draugr, and honestly you'd have a hard time convincing me that it wasn't the inspiration behind White Walkers. The demon comes from Nordic folklore. It's an ancient undead monster known to rise up from its grave and attack the living. Oh, and it's most active at night and in the winter. Sound familiar? When a person dies and is buried in the ground, it is believed that they will turn into a Draugr if they either practiced black magic, were executed, died an accidental death, or were buried outside a churchyard. I know, it's a broad spectrum and it doesn't make a lot of sense, but that is the criteria according to the Nordic folklore. Along with attacking the living, Draugrs have been known to climb onto the top of people's homes and stomp on their roofs to keep them from getting a good night's rest. If a person inside the home becomes restless and decides to leave their house, this demon will kill them. Quite easily, might I add, because they are incredibly strong. When there are no humans around, these Game of Thrones-esque zombie demons have also been known to eat livestock and tear apart fences and barns. Oh, and one more thing, the only way to kill them is to cut their heads off, burn them, and then scatter their ashes in the ground. It's a process, but probably worth it considering how aggressive these particular demons tend to be.
The Agitar is not an entity you want to run into. Much like a sag, just the sight of her alone can cause you to drop dead. Agitar comes from Finnish mythology, known not only as the devil of the woods, but the mother of the devil himself. Agitar is incredibly ugly and evil, spreading diseases and pestilence wherever she goes, and she often takes the form of a serpent. She's accompanied by them as well, and some stories even say she can control them. Snakes come up a lot in ancient myths about demonic entities. Unsurprisingly, people still fear snakes today, but especially back in the day, snakes were often seen as symbols of evil and poison in cultures across the world. People in ancient Finland believed Agitar could bring bad luck and misfortune just by being near. She was blamed for all sorts of problems, from poor harvests to outbreaks of sickness. If things started going wrong, it was said that Agitar was probably lurking nearby, making life difficult just for the sake of it, as demons do.
In Japanese folklore, there is something called yokai, which directly translated means strange apparitions. They are a class of supernatural entities and spirits whose behavior can range from benevolent and kind to mischievous, all the way to malevolent and incredibly dangerous. One such malevolent and dangerous yokai is the Rokuubi, the apparition of a woman with sharp teeth, a taste for human flesh, and a neck that can stretch out of her shoulders and slither around the room like a 50-foot long snake. One nurse, we'll call her Jackie, shared an encounter with a Rokuubi, claiming that she had been attacked by one while working at a hospital in Japan. One night, one of Jackie's patients called her over to say that a woman wearing a red kimono had been standing beside her bed the whole night, but she couldn't see the woman's face because it had been covered with long black hair. The next night, a different patient told Jackie almost the same thing, except this time, the woman's neck was stretched up so high that her head was touching the ceiling. The nurse wasn't convinced, and the hospital wing she was working at was pretty much empty, so she decided to lay down for a quick cat nap. She awoke to a phone call from her mother in the middle of the night who said, "Honey, are you okay? I had a terrible dream that you fell asleep at the hospital and a creepy woman was watching you as you slept." Upon hearing this, Jackie dropped her phone, and when she went to pick it up, she saw 2 feet underneath her bed. And when she looked up, the outstretched neck of a woman smiling from ear to ear with dead eyes and razor-sharp teeth. I guess Jackie fainted because the next thing she knew, she woke up surrounded by hospital staff. She quit her job that day and hasn't returned to the hospital since. And honestly, I don't blame her. I'm covered in goosebumps just from reciting the story. I couldn't imagine living it.
Now, we can't talk about demons without mentioning at least another yokai. There are tons of these creatures and entities that fall under the yokai umbrella in Japanese folklore. They include demons, ghosts, monsters, and there's loads of types of each. The Enko are river-dwelling yokai, resembling monkeys. Don't let their appearance deceive you into thinking the worst they'll do is play a little trick on you though. These are some violent, sadistic animals right here, and tales about them get very graphic. Enko are said to live in rivers and along the seashore. They're kinda like kappa, who are more like turtle creatures, but these ones are way worse. They're excellent swimmers, and if you happen to come across one while taking a dip, it's probably gonna be game over for you in the worst way. See, these creatures love eating human liver, fresh human liver. Their method of obtaining it, shoving their arm right up their victim's rear end and pulling it out. The worst rectal exam you'll ever receive.
Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night only to discover that you can't move your arms or legs? Not only that, but you can't seem to muster up the ability to make a sound, and so when you see a dark scraggly demon lurking at the foot of your bed or sitting directly on top of you, all you can do is sit there and stare at it, feeling nothing but pure terror. Well, if you have, it sounds like you've been visited by a Phi Am. The Phi Am has its roots in Thai folklore, where it is believed to be the lesser known cause of the well-known phenomenon of sleep paralysis. Phi Ams have been known to sit on their victims' chests in the middle of the night, restricting their movement and instilling fear into their souls, and in extreme cases, crushing their lungs entirely and taking their lives. It is said that the creature tends to haunt men more than women, and so in some places where the demons are more common, men have actually been known to don traditional women's bedtime clothing to avoid being haunted by the demon. Small price to pay for not having your lungs crushed.
The Alp is a creepy creature from German folklore, and it's the stuff of nightmares, literally. Known for causing horrible nightmares, the Alp is said to sit on its victims' chests in the middle of the night, causing the sleeper to wake up in a panic, unable to breathe or move as they're crushed under the weight of the creature. Yes, this is another sleep paralysis demon. The Alp is usually described as a small elf-like being, but it can shapeshift into other forms, usually animals like cats, dogs, or snakes. It's also said to sometimes ride a horse. The Alp also wears a special cap that gives it the power to become invisible, sneak into people's homes unseen. This is just another one of the many demonic entities people used to try and explain sleep paralysis back in the day. And when people would wake up feeling terrified, unable to move, with a heavy pressure on their chest, having a hallucination of something sitting on top of them or lurking at the foot of their beds, it's no wonder people thought there were malevolent demons roaming around in the night. I can only imagine how horrifying it would have been to grow up around this time. I mean, I've had sleep paralysis, and if my mother told me that it was thanks to a demon, I would just never go to bed again. Google Street View launched in 2007, and for just under a year, users were able to see a 360-degree view of various military bases throughout the United States, using this brand new feature. What a glorious 8 months it was. Then in March of 2008, the Pentagon crashed the party and had Google remove the images of the bases. I mean, some people might have thought this was shady, but I think it's completely understandable. I mean, they're military bases. Do you really want anyone from anywhere in the world to have the ability to scope these places out in detail from every angle, from the comfort of their own home? Yeah, it's a security risk, so they asked Google to take the images down. That doesn't mean I'm saying they're not hiding aliens in some of these places, though.
Hoping to get a quick glance at the Marcule nuclear site? Well, too bad, because it's restricted by Google per the request of the French government, which is fair. I mean, it is the top nuclear research facility in France. There is something different about the way the facility has been censored, though, in comparison to other locations on Google Maps. You see, instead of being blurred out like other military bases like the ones James just mentioned, or the former home of Ariel Castro, the nuclear site is pixelated for some reason. Perhaps I'm reading into this, but the distinction is strange. Anyways, some not so fun facts about the Markyol nuclear site. It exploded on Monday, September 12th of 2011. Well, part of it exploded anyway, specifically the furnace used to melt nuclear waste. The explosion caused the death of one man who was, and I quote, carbonized, which basically means his body was turned into charcoal. The explosion also caused serious injuries to 4 others, as well as a massive on-site fire. While the facility admitted that the explosion might have caused a low-level radiation leak, they assured the public that it was nothing to worry about. Okay, sure. The reason for the explosion, however, was never revealed. But what is interesting about the tragedy is that it came just 1 week after the French president publicly knocked the anti-nuclear trend, which favors less unstable forms of energy above nuclear energy. I'm not saying that the two are related, but I'm not saying that they're not.
In 2003, Google decided to block a series of ads from the environmental group Oceania. The ads were targeting the cruise line Royal Caribbean for what Oceania saw as poor sewage treatment practices. But why did Google block these ads? Well, Google came out with a statement writing, "Google does not accept advertising if the ad or site advocates against other individuals, groups, or organizations." Oceania, of course, wasn't happy about this. They argued that their ads were factual and important for raising awareness about the environmental impact of cruise ships, and blasted Google for silencing their right to try and hold big companies accountable for pollution. As stated by Oceania's chief executive officer, Andrew Sharpless, "This is outrageous. For this company to claim to promote freedom of expression and yet deny us the right to effectively advocate against pollution is blatant hypocrisy." The question that leaves us with is why they chose to blunt our right to express ourselves, if not from cruise industry pressure.
There is no street view of North Centennial Island on Google Maps, and for good reason. Not only are we restricted from viewing the islands on Google, but Google is restricted from documenting the island itself, and that is because North Centennial Island is one of the most restricted islands in the whole entire world, and that is because it is inhabited by an uncontacted and highly protected and incredibly dangerous tribe of people. Uncontacted meaning that the natives of North Centennial have had quite literally no extended contact with the outside world. Incredibly dangerous meaning that if you get too close to the shores of the island, they will kill you, rip your body into pieces, and then bury those pieces in the sand. It's happened before. In 2018, an evangelical missionary named John Allen Chow attempted to share the word of God with the island's natives. He was last seen alive paddling a rowboat to shore. He was last seen altogether the following day by fishermen near the island who spotted Chow's limp body being dragged across the sand by the natives. I have to say, Google Maps leaving this island undocumented is not something I'm overly torn up about. No one gets paid enough for that kind of job.
In China, Google is barely usable. Almost everything is met with heavy restrictions. Google followed China's censorship rules until 2010, filtering out results the Chinese government didn't like. This was part of the Great Firewall, a series of strict internet regulations enforced by the People's Republic of China. Now, Google complied in order to avoid getting blocked altogether, as had happened back in 2002. They promised not to share user info with the government though, and let users know when content was restricted. In 2009, Google came under fire from the Chinese government for allowing search results with explicit content and was ordered to block certain overseas websites. In January of 2010, after a cyber attack targeting Chinese descendants, Google announced that they were going to stop censoring results on China's version of Google. By March 2010, Google redirected Chinese Google users to Google Hong Kong, where search results were uncensored. But China's Great Firewall still blocked certain terms. Then in 2018, it was revealed that Google was now working on a new censored search engine for China called Project Dragonfly. This was a highly controversial project that led a number of Google employees to quit. The project has apparently been terminated, but Google is still highly filtered in the country.
Another thing you won't be able to find on Google: classified Pentagon documents leaked by 21-year-old National Guardsman Jack Teixeira, who not only stole these classified and highly sensitive documents from the Pentagon, but also posted said documents online on Discord, which is an instant messaging social media platform that allows for text messaging, video and voice calls, and mixed media sharing. The documents shared by Texeira contained a mix of tactical statistics and battlefield maps drafted by the Pentagon staff. Statistics and maps that relate to current ongoing global conflicts. Big no-no. The whole thing is insane, and it's really baffling that a 21-year-old could have done this, but according to the government, Jack Texeira is guilty, and will be spending the next 16 years of his life in federal prison, following a debrief with the Defense and the Justice Department of the United States, during which time he will likely be interrogated and forced to return whatever sensitive materials he might still have in his possession. While some images of the leaked documents do remain online, most of them have now been restricted by Google per the requests of the United States government, which makes sense. They were plans about what they were going to do in regards to an ongoing conflict. That's not something you want circulating the internet. Or is it?
In our number 8 spot today, we have pillows under a microscope. This one may seem a little specific, but just you wait. Pillows are the thing we rest our weary heads on every night to get our 8 hours. Who am I kidding? Most of us are getting what? 4? Regardless of whoever sleeps the most or the least, our pillows all are going to be looking a little similar. The pillow seems so inviting, so warm, so cozy. It's a safe place, right? Wrong. You get up close to that thing, view it under a microscope, and you reveal all the other things that also like to rest their little heads on it. Under a microscope, the common house dust mites that lurk on many of our pillows become alarmingly visible, and as we speak, there's probably more than you'd like to know living on yours. These guys like to live on your pillow because their favorite food is your dead skin cells. Yeah. It's disgusting. I'd appreciate it if they could at least do something to alleviate nightmares, but no, they just are the nightmare. In our number 7 spot today, we have feeding time at an eel farm. One day on Reddit, I came across a video that was titled Feeding Time at an Eel Farm, which I mean is exactly what the video is, but man, I was not expecting it to look like this. As soon as they drop the food in, a bunch of freaky little water snakes immediately start jumping at it. But like, when I say a bunch, it's so much more than I could have ever expected. There is something about this video that really feeds into the whole fear of the ocean thing, and while this video is definitely oddly terrifying, it's also important to note the danger of these eel farms, especially for the kinds of eels that are endemic to an area, those that are endangered, or both. Eels are long-living creatures who only breed once, and they don't do it in captivity. When most of a generation of eels are caught, it proves to be a really large problem in terms of population. In our number 6 spot today, we have zombie ants. These infected creatures are so horrifying to me, they honestly are like nightmare fuel. There is a type of insect pathogenic fungus that is commonly found in tropical forest ecosystems. This fungus infects a certain kind of ant, and once infected, this ant basically turns into a zombie. Good news is the ant doesn't suddenly go around eating others of its kind, but it is still being controlled and manipulated by this fungus. The ant will leave their nest and usual trails and head for the forest floor, which has better conditions for fungal growth. From here, the ant will then bite and attach itself to the major vein on a leaf, and basically they just stay there until they die, which is usually around 4 to 10 days. During these days, the fungus will basically start to sprout out of the ant's head so as to be prepared to infect the next unsuspecting creature, and that is what Google will show you awful images of. Maybe it's because I hate bugs so much that this one disturbs me, but I don't know. It's just really unsettling. I get like Last of Us vibes from this one. In our number 5 spot today, we have Lamprey Eye Disease. I'll be totally honest and upfront with you. This is something that is not real and instead was a classic internet hoax, but that doesn't mean it wasn't based on a real thing, and it also doesn't mean that the very unsettling photoshopped photos of it aren't completely upsetting imagery. Basically, a lamprey is a real water-bound parasite fish that has ancient lineage here on Earth, and they also have the creepiest looking head in the world. So the people of the internet decided to create and spread news of this fake disease inspired by the real creature's weird head, and thus lamprey disease was born. And in my opinion, lamprey eye disease was the worst of all of the lamprey options. It's exactly what it sounds like, and basically a search of lamprey eye disease will reveal images of a person whose eye has been photoshopped to appear like the head of that parasite. While I can rest easy knowing I'll never experience this in real life, there are some images that just should never exist, whether photoshopped or not. In our number 4 spot today, we have the 80s Kleenex commercial. There is a legend that suggests there is actually a curse surrounding this really weird and creepy Kleenex commercial that aired in the 80s. The commercial itself is very strange, and it depicts some sort of ogre child thing being sung to by a woman who is acting really strangely, and the song she is singing is also perfectly fit for a horror movie. The ad was quickly pulled from the air as it had people calling in explaining that they were really creeped out by it, but of course the internet took hold of it beforehand. So that creepy looking child I mentioned before, well, many people believe that it resembles an Oni demon. There are of course major consequences for looking at a demon, which is exactly what this urban legend surrounds. Basically, legend goes that the crew who worked in this commercial production ended up all passing away after working on the commercial, all in really mysterious ways, which people of course believe is due to the demon on set. All in all, I think these haunting tales are enough to have me staying away from googling it any further. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Island of the Dolls. The Island of the Dolls is basically exactly what it sounds like, and while it is exceptionally creepy to look at, the story behind it is even more disturbing. The island sits in the canals south of Mexico City and is the home of many absolutely terrifying and mutilated dolls. Even in the daylight, dolls look creepy with their missing limbs and heads and weird beady eyes, but at nighttime, the island is nightmare fuel. The story behind this island is very tragic. It starts off with the only person on the island, Don Julian Santana, finding a body. He was of course absolutely beside himself over this gruesome discovery, and shortly after he saw a doll floating by in the water. He strung the doll up in a tree in order to appease her soul and to protect the island from evil. While this is an extremely dark story and the dolls are very creepy, I think we can all certainly understand why the dolls definitely needed to stay there. In our number 2 spot today, we have thrush. If you were searching this term looking for a plump, soft plumaged, small to medium sized bird, you might want to be a little more specific. This is because just the general term might have Google confusing your harmless bird interest for something else. Thrush is also the term used to describe a certain infection caused by a yeast which is called Candida. Candida lives on and in all of us, but sometimes there can be a change that causes it to multiply, and this can cause an infection and an overgrowth. Thrush is seen when the fungal growth takes over the mouth, throat, or esophagus, and while this is not something that is uncommon at all, it definitely can be a bit surprising when you expected a cute little bird and instead got images of someone's esophagus. This is one Google search that you definitely need to be clear about what you're searching for, because who knows what results might show up. In our number 1 spot today, we have your symptoms. It really is the classic tale. You start having symptoms, whether common ones or not, and you take to the search bar to input those symptoms, hoping for some kind of an answer or perhaps a home remedy, and boom, you are met with the news. Your symptoms could only mean one thing: a rare terminal illness. I swear, according to Google, that is the answer every time, and to be honest, this could be quite dangerous in a multitude of ways. Firstly, the panic. It's always best not to send yourself into a downward spiral for no reason, and it is definitely true that a Google search is not the same as a real doctor visit. Now, I totally know that a doctor visit isn't always accessible to everyone, and sometimes we do have to rely on a bit of our own research to carry us through, but be wary of the results. Don't get too spooked at what you see come back, but if you do happen to get worried, it's always good to get a second opinion when you can. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the inside of your stomach. I'm not entirely sure why anyone would want to Google this, but if you're curious about some of your intestinal anatomy, you perhaps are looking for a nicely colored diagram to learn more about what's going on in your own body, but unfortunately, that's not all that comes up on one of these searches. Googling the inside of your stomach will have some image results of, well, the inside of your stomach. What did you think? It's exactly what you asked for, but let me be clear, that is not a site for everybody. Looking at these images would definitely make quite a few of us sick to our stomachs, unless you're a medical student or a professional, or just know that you can handle the graphic images that might pop up on the screen. This is definitely a search that should just stay out of your history. In our number 9 spot today, we have crime scene photos. There unfortunately are many crime scene photos on the internet that are just one symbol simple search away, but today we are talking about just one, and that is the Nikki Katsouras crash scene photos. In October of 2006, Nikki was 18 and driving her father's Porsche in Lake Forest in California when she unfortunately lost control of the vehicle and crashed. The crash is said to have been extremely gruesome, and like any crime scene, photos were taken of it. Unfortunately, these photos did end up getting leaked through emails, and from there they were posted to and spread on the internet. It has become abundantly clear that Nikki's family does not want people looking at these photos, so other than the fact that something like this is just not safe for life, I think they are making a perfectly reasonable request that definitely should be respected where possible. All this to say, I didn't and won't be googling any of these photos. In our number 8 spot today we have the brain-eating amoeba. Naegleria fowleri is more commonly known as the brain-eating amoeba for a pretty fair reason, and this is one of those things that once you learn about it, it can kind of send you down a rabbit hole. Alright, we've all been there. This parasite is single-celled and thrives in warm bodies of water. It can enter the human body when water that contains the amoeba enters the nose. It will then travel from there via the olfactory nerves, and within a few days symptoms will begin to present themselves. The parasite can cause a brain infection known as meningoencephalitis, which can cause severe brain inflammation. How was that for a one-time, just one shot? Pretty impressive, that's a big word. Symptoms will start with a fever, a headache, some nausea and vomiting, and a stiff neck. Eventually though, the symptoms will progress into lack of attention, loss of balance, seizures, hallucinations. The parasite will most likely put the host into a coma, and almost 100% of the people who have been infected have lost their lives. This is all to say, this terrifying parasite is one that I would refrain from googling unless you just want to be totally freaked out about its existence. I know I just told you about it, but don't Google, because it only gets worse from here. In our number 7 spot today we have the dark web. Just one of those really self-explanatory things. The dark web has stuff on it that we don't even want to begin to think about. And not only this, but just casually trying to access the dark web is likely to have you being added to some kind of internet watch list somewhere. A search for the dark web might reveal some odd conspiracy theories that might get you roped in. It might show you some horrific content you definitely don't want to see, or you might even see yourself getting hacked or a virus, or who knows, any of the other disgusting stuff that lurks on the dark corners of the internet. Who am I kidding? I feel like the dark web takes up more space on the internet than I want to know. All I'm saying is, hi, how are you? Let's all stay on this side of the internet, the fun, nice side, where we talk about creepy stuff, but we don't do creepy stuff. Know what I'm saying? In our number 6 spot today we have calculus bridge. At first I thought this was just like a terrifying math problem or something, but as it turns out, it really is just a dentist's nightmare. In the dental world, the word calculus means something very different. Basically, what dental calculus is, when you don't properly brush or floss dental plaque away, it can combine with the minerals that are in your saliva and eventually turn into calculus. While regular plaque can be brushed away, you definitely need professional help in order to get rid of calculus. Now, calculus bridge is like a step up from regular calculus. According to Doctor of Dental Surgery Gary Schlotterer, quote, a calculus bridge occurs when tartar or calculus builds up so much that it connects with the adjacent teeth and forms a solid bridge of deposits. You can visually see this bridge due to its brown or tan color along the edge of the teeth by the gum line, but of course, when we Google this term, images is only going to show us some of the most severe cases, which can see the bridge extending into the gum line or further along the surface of the teeth. Unless you're particularly interested in dental hygienics, this might be a good search to just stay away from. In our number 5 spot today we have a chicken laying an egg. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, I'm fairly certain it was the egg. We can discuss that all later, because what we are discussing right now is why you should never Google a chicken laying an egg. I feel like this is hopefully pretty self-explanatory, but it's definitely a strange sight. You'd be surprised how much chicken egg laying content there is out there though. I mean, one of the top results when I searched this was a YouTube video called "Chicken Laying an Egg!" and then in parentheses, close-up 3, which I think insinuates a close-up 2 and 1, and I'm just gonna say it. Who needs 3 separate parts of close-up shots That's weird. Anyway, some things I think are better left to the imagination, and some are best just not being thought of at all. And I think this counts as one of those. In our number 4 spot today, we have Ed Gein's house. Ed Gein was an absolute monster and is the basis for many horror movies today because of how horrifying his crimes were. Inside of his home, authorities found different household items that were made out of body parts, some from the victims of his crimes and some from the graves he would go and search and snatch from. There are some photos circulating the incident that are more tame, but some of them show just a drop of the horrors that lay inside of the home. For a while, for some unknown reasons, it was thought that they might use this house as a tourist attraction, but thankfully the house ended up burning down, and honestly I feel truly glad that it doesn't exist anymore. Save yourself the real life nightmare and just refrain from googling anything to do with Ed Gein, unless you want to see lamps made out of humans. In our number 3 spot today, we have historical Halloween costumes. In this day and age, when Halloween time comes around, we see all types of costumes. We see a few spooky, scary ones, but for the most part we see princesses, or fairies, or basketball players, or some sort of pop culture reference. But back in the day, Halloween was a terrifying time. And I'm not saying that because people dressed as these elaborate, scary creatures. I just mean the absolute scraps that people had to throw together to make a Halloween mask are truly scarier than any creature I could ever come up with. Googling Halloween costumes from history will bring up photos showing a nice little family as they're ready to celebrate the spookiest day of the year, but their costumes are full on terror inducing. It just gives me the Strangers vibes. It's very unsettling. In our number 2 spot today, we have the wet koala. I love little koala bears. They're cute, they're always just chillin'. I feel like most people enjoy a nice photo of a koala, alright, brighten your day a bit. But for some strange reason, when you Google wet koala, everything changes. Wet koala searches bring back results of koalas that appear to be drenched in some sort of water, but for some reason, in all of these photos, the demeanor of the koala has changed. These wet koalas are not the nice, kind, cuddly, adorable ones I thought I knew, and instead are these angry, menacing, teeth-bearing ones that I really never expected to see. Okay, as it turns out, the teeth-bearing one is actually all thanks to Photoshop, but I still stand by my original point. That Photoshop job really made me think of koalas in a different light, and the original photos they used to Photoshop still don't have the koalas looking too happy. Maybe they just aren't fans of the rain, I don't know. In our number 1 spot today, we have eyelashes. In the last part of this video series, we talked about Googling your pillow under a microscope, and now we are talking about Googling your eyelashes under a microscope. Our eyelashes help keep our eyes clean, and the stray ones give us wishes, and they seem like harmless, little easygoing hairs, right? Well, turns out when we go a little closer, our eyelashes are the home to a disgusting little secret. The lashes aren't really the problem, the more concerning thing is the creatures that call them home. These creatures, called demodex, are mites that live on everyone's eyelashes. They, like the pillow bugs, feed off of dead skin cells as well as the oils that collect in the follicles. Okay, are you ready for the worst part? I know, it's crazy that we aren't even past it yet, but here we go. At nighttime, while you're sleeping, these guys come out of your eyelashes and head onto other regions of your face, and this is where they breed, okay? They then return to your lash follicles to lay up to 25 eggs. Yeah, I don't know. I woke up like just a couple hours ago and I'm still trying to recover from what just happened to me. Alright? I don't like it. I don't like it. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have guinea worm disease. This is a neglected tropical disease that is caused by a parasite, and it really is just terrible. This disease unfortunately affects poor communities, especially in remote areas of the world that do not have water that is safe to drink. Basically, what happens with this disease is a person will become infected after drinking water containing the water fleas that are infected with the larva of the guinea worm. That already sounds terrible to me, but it does get worse. The worms will then penetrate the digestive tract and stay here while they grow to size. Okay, even worse. But it keeps going. About a year later, these horrible creatures will then migrate to a spot where they want to exit, normally somewhere on a lower limb. From here, they will create a very painful blister on the skin, which will eventually burst into an excruciatingly painful open wound. From here, the real nightmare starts, because not only is the pain terrible, but it will last for several weeks, while a long, sometimes up to 1 meter, string-like worm will slowly crawl out of this wound. It honestly makes me sick thinking about it. This process can have a person totally unable to really move for around 3 to 10 weeks it takes for the worm to leave the body. This is Complete nightmare fuel. At this point, there isn't a treatment or prevention for this disease other than having access to safe water, of course, which should be a reality for every human. In good news, however, the number of cases of this has dropped drastically since the mid-1980s, and hopefully it could be on its way to eradication. All in all, unless you want a complete horror show and some awful imagery burned into your brain forever, maybe skip the Google search of this one. Alright, I told you what you need to know.
The Mongolian deathworm demon is honestly just gross. It's gross. It's gross to look at, it's gross to think about, and yet here I am talking about it to you because I respect you enough to know that you are brave enough to handle the gross demon worm. And I'm proud of you for that. Now, while many zoologists believe that the idea of the Mongolian demon worm comes from an exaggeration of real snake and worm sightings, Mongolian locals to this day claim otherwise, and many of them say that they have actually seen this giant creature for themselves and just narrowly escaped its vicious attack. You see, Mongolian deathworms are said to have a large circular row of incredibly sharp teeth and venom that acts like acid. My advice, if you're in Mongolia, avoid the desert. And maybe you will make it out alive.
This demon is about as evil and demonic as a demon can be. Lamashtu, another demon from Sumerian and Mesopotamian mythology. An entity with the head of a lion and long, sharp talons and claws like a bird. Lamashtu really doesn't have any redeeming qualities. Some of her hobbies include, but are not limited to, messing with women while they're pregnant, kidnapping newborns, sucking out men's BLOOD, infesting rivers and lakes, spreading disease and sickness in general, ruining crops, and giving people nightmares. Lamashtu was so terrifyingly evil that people would often try to ward her off with the help of another demon, Pazuzu, Lamashtu's arch nemesis. The Batman to her Joker, the He-Man to her Skeletor, the list goes on, you get my point.
Imagine, you're walking home one night, it's dark, and you're all alone. All of a sudden you look up and realize you're standing face to face with the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. She has piercing eyes, shiny black hair, and then she starts to smile, exposing 2 rows of red-stained, razor-sharp teeth. You fall backwards to see that something is missing. Her body. This woman isn't a woman at all, just a floating head with half a neck and a trail of guts and organs hanging out. You have stumbled across a Karasu hungry for human flesh. There are many different stories regarding the origin of this creature who hunts at night and then returns to her headless body in the morning to go about her day indistinguishable from any other woman except for her tired expression. The most popular is that the Karasu was a princess living in Cambodia in the 15th century who was engaged to a prince but in love with someone else, a commoner. Eventually she was caught in her affair and sentenced to death by fire. She consulted a witch who cast a spell of protection for the young princess, but unfortunately the spell didn't kick in until the fires had almost reached the young woman's head. Other stories claim that the demon is a woman who broke a deal with another demon, or a woman who made a grave mistake while practicing black magic. However she came to be, people in Thai culture say that those who consult with demons or practice similar magic are doomed to meet the same fate as the princess when they die.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Ring Evulsion. Alright, if you're a Jimmy Fallon fan, you might remember a few years ago when he took a couple weeks break from the show, and when he came back, he clearly had a hand injury, which he explained was of course the reason for his absence. What had happened is that Jimmy experienced ring evulsion. This horrible thing is an injury that occurs when you're wearing a ring on your finger and it catches on something or somehow creates so much pressure that it severely damages the soft tissue on your finger. And what I mean by severely damages is that it can basically like almost take your finger off without really taking it off, if you know what I mean. Or it can like deglove it, where it's basically like skinned. Either way, it's absolutely terrible. And while Jimmy turned it into a great story, it's definitely not a pretty sight, and a Google search could bring about some pretty gruesome image results. In our number 9 spot today, we have pressure cooker backpacks. This one is gonna be pretty self-explanatory, but someone learned the hard way that the combination of Googling the words pressure cooker bombs and then backpacks is one that no one should dare. In 2013, a Suffolk County man Googled these things and the police later showed up to his house. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a strange combination of things to Google one after the other, but in case it isn't just a coincidence, I'm glad someone is looking out for these kinds of things. In the end, after some investigation, the police were able to determine that there was no threat and that the man was just feeling a little curious that day. Sure, he also learned a very valuable valuable lesson and likely regrets his search history. In our number 8 spot today, we have insider trading. Listen, I don't know anything about trading or stocks or anything like that, but I have learned to never Google the words insider trading in an international account. Someone else made this mistake and ended up paying the consequences. Back in July of 2017, MIT researcher Fei Yan ended up being arrested after he Googled that phrase and then allegedly purchased a bunch of stock. The arresting charges were 3 counts of fraud because federal prosecutors claimed that this stock that was purchased made him $120,000 in illegal profits. Apparently, this guy was using information that was obtained through his spouse's job, which gave illegal insight into certain trading options in order to make these trades, but not before Googling how to avoid law enforcement while doing it, and a bunch of other things that created quite a clear timeline for authorities during the investigation. I guess this search is okay should you not be planning to follow through on the illegal insider trading, but it's probably best just not to Google it at all, just to be as safe as possible. You don't want the police showing up at your door like the other guy. In our number 7 spot today, we have the FDA Defect Levels Handbook. Each year, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, they release a report that details something that, honestly, I want to remain blissfully ignorant about. This report details what the maximum levels of different horrible things are that are legally allowed to be in the food that we all eat. What I mean by horrible things is stuff like rodent hairs, maggots, you know, stuff you really don't want in your food at all, because what in the actual world that's horrible? For your own sanity, this is a good search to stay away from, but if you're one of the people who is just way too curious to stay away from it, just remember that I tried to warn you. I mean, personally, I don't want to know how many bugs are allowed to be in my food. I just don't think I could handle it, okay? In our number 6 spot today, we have Crocodil. This is the nickname that is used to describe desomorphine, which is a morphine derivative that has some extremely strong effects. This illicit substance, unfortunately, has found its way into the lives of those battling addiction, and it has absolutely wreaked havoc, and the results of its usage are truly terrifying. Unfortunately, much of the production of this substance is illegal, which only leads to an increase in the negative impact it has on the users. The side effects of it often are due to certain toxic substances, which does what is referred to as cooking the skin. Definitely sounds completely horrible. It can also lead to large-scale tissue infection or even damage in the area where it was administered. In fact, the effects of this substance are so bad that many refer to it as the flesh-eating drug. It's safe to say this is definitely something that no one should do, and probably just don't Google it either. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Grizzly Tapes. Okay, you should never Google this because these videos should never be watched, because this is something that should have never even been recorded. These tapes were the last thing left by Timothy Treadwell and his girlfriend. Timothy Treadwell was known as the Grizzly Man. He spent 13 years of his life going in and out of living with bears, which for the most part sounds like the most terrifying thing you could imagine, but for him, he wanted to show the world that you could live with bears and that they were not an animal to be feared. Well, even though he was able to spend over a decade in their presence, it's this living situation that would eventually lead to his death. Timothy was making a documentary about bears, so naturally he was spending quite a bit of time with them as he filmed. One day, while he was with a grizzly and filming for the doc alongside his girlfriend who was there to help him with the movie, the bear that they were interacting with ended up turning angry, frightened, or something happened that changed its behavior because it went on to kill both members of the couple as the camera rolled on. It's horrible. You can't see too much of what is happening, but you sure can hear it all, which is definitely bad enough. In our number 4 spot today, we have a jigger. When I hear this word, my mind goes to the bartending tool. It's like a shot measurer, okay? After I finish up my work here, I go to work at a restaurant. I see these things every week. They're my friend. If you were interested in perhaps purchasing some new barware, however, be careful with your search when using this term. While the tool is all fine and well, a jigger flea is nightmare fuel. These little insects with with the same name as the trusty tool like to burrow into skin where they then lay eggs. Yeah, definitely don't want any images of that coming up in your search. I'm just trying to look out for you, really. Yeah, these small little parasitic guys are only 1 millimeter at first, and when they initially burrow into your skin, it might just feel like a little itchy or whatever, but as their abdomens swell with eggs, pressure can be created, and this pressure could press on nerves or blood vessels, which not only is just awful to think about, but can cause pain that ranges from mild to severe. All in all, just be careful what you Google, because not everything is what it seems. In our number 3 spot today, we have this Steve Irwin stingray video. Like, how random, honestly, but don't Google it. Like, why? This one really gets me right in the feels. Steve Irwin, best known as the crocodile hunter, was famous for his wildlife interactions, but as many of us know, this passion for animals and an interaction with one in particular sadly turned deadly. On September 4th, 2006, Steve was taking part in the production of a documentary series, Ocean's Deadliest. That day, there was some not so great weather, which led to a bit of a pause in the filming. Since nothing was really going on, Steve decided to take a bit of a snorkel into the shallow waters nearby, and they filmed as he did this. He wanted to use the footage in his daughter's TV show, Bindi the Jungle Girl. As they swam in the water that day, Steve approached a stingray that was about 2 meters large, or 6.5 feet, and he approached it from the back in order to try and get some footage of it swimming away. That is not what this stingray did though. Instead, it propped on its front and started stabbing wildly with its tail as a defensive response. Unfortunately, this caused one of the barb pieces to pierce Steve's heart, which unfortunately led to his death. Despite the crew members administering CPR and rushing him to shore, there was just nothing that could be done. It is believed that this was the only fatality from a stingray that has ever been recorded on video. This is, of course, just tragic, but it also led to a bit of a war against stingrays afterwards. For weeks after his death, stingrays were being found on the beaches of Queensland with their tails cut off. No one is sure if this was done as an act of revenge against stingrays everywhere or what the case was. But yeah, this is one video that don't Google. No one wants to see it. It's just terrible. It's sad. In our number 2 spot today, we have found in fast food. Of course, we have all heard tales of people making stuff up to try and get some kind of free food from their favorite fast food restaurants, but also there are some very real, very disturbing stories out there of stuff people have found, and it is all too searchable. If you searched things people have found in fast food, you'd be met with enough evidence to make you question every fast food meal you have ever and will ever eat in your life. People have found hardware parts, human skin, an entire rat, bugs, hair, and even a whole chicken head. I have a million questions, but I don't even want to attempt a Google search to find out the answers because I'm scared of what I might find out. Reading enough of these harrowing fast food tales is enough to ruin anyone's appetite. In our number 1 spot today, we have mouth larva. Pretty self-explanatory as to why you shouldn't Google this one, and I'm not even sure why anyone would. Maybe in an attempt to find moth larva information and there was a bit of a typo, but even then, maybe just stay away from Googling that as well. Whatever reason you might be thinking of or accidentally typing mouth larva into the search bar, it's best to refrain from because this is one search that will just gross you right out. This search will definitely yield results of humans and other animals that have larvae crawling in between their teeth. Yep, exactly what it sounds like. Mouth larva. Larvae and mouths. It's horrible, it's disgusting, and there's not only photos, but there's videos too, in case you wanted to get really weird. Just because you can Google these things does not mean you should. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Botfly Removal. Okay, we're starting off strong. Taylor and I used to watch this vet show a lot, and there were a lot of these on there, and let me tell you, it is not for everyone. If you're a fan of things like Dr. Pimple Popper, you might be able to stomach this one, but should that not be up your alley, this is a Google search to definitely stay away from. Botflies are these pesky little flies that like to lay their egg in a host. The host, which can be human or animal, will have to deal with a horrifying fat flesh-eating botfly maggot, which will later need to be removed from your skin. It is horrible. People will go to the doctor or take their animal to the vet because they noticed a strange bump. Little do they know there is actually an entire maggot living in their skin. It's honestly disgusting. Just the thought of it gives me chills. But there is relief at the end, which is always good. It's honestly just surprising to see the damage that these creatures leave behind. But you'll thank me later if you just don't Google it. It's one image I'll never be able to erase from my mind. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Victor Seyenko video. Victor is just one part of a group that is responsible for a string of in Ukraine that took place in June and July of 2007. In the end, he was charged with 29 separate incidents, 21 of which were and the rest were incidents where the victims thankfully survived the horrendous attacks. Aside from just how extremely terrible this entire thing is, the case gained a certain notoriety because of the fact that there was actually a recording of one of these crimes that was leaked and found its way onto the internet. That is because the people committing these acts had intended to sell the videos of them being done, which is thought to have been the biggest motivation for the crimes. In the end, Victor was found guilty of all of these crimes and is currently serving a life sentence, but that video still lurks out there unfortunately on the internet, and I think it definitely goes without saying that this is something that is just not safe for life. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Wandering Black Hole. The Hubble Space Telescope is one of the most important scientific creations of all time. The Hubble walked, so James Webb could run. Since its launch into low Earth orbit in the 1990s, this space has been delivering us amazing space discoveries, and this one is a bit of a frightening one. Back in 2017, the Hubble located a black hole, which is already frightening, but this one was peculiar. That is because they found that this one was being pulled or manipulated by gravitational waves. Basically, what this means is that at some point, this black hole is going to escape its own galaxy and begin roaming around the universe. Black holes are bad enough, I don't want them to start wandering around. The good news, however, is that despite this black hole weighing approximately the same as 1 billion suns as it flies through space at 5 million miles per hour, it's estimated to be about 8 billion light years away from Earth, so we're pretty safe at this point. But here's the thing, if we found one, it is very likely that there are many more out there. One search of this wandering black hole and you are going down a space rabbit hole of only the most terrifying things. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Rat King. I would have thought that this was just the male antagonist in the Nutcracker, but turns out it is far, far worse. Rats are pretty freaky to many people for a variety of reasons, but the image of this one is even worse than just a single standalone rat. Basically, the term Rat King refers to a large group of rats that all have their tails tied together at the end. It is indeed a rare occurrence, and the tails could be stuck together for a variety of reasons. Whether it's because the hair got entangled together, there's some sort of sticky substance holding them together, or just, you know, a regular old knot. Whatever the case is, a Google search of this term will only have images coming up, and it truly is unsettling to see. It's obviously sad because no one wants to see an animal in a tricky situation, but also, it's rats. Rats are creepy. A bunch of rats all tied together is extra creepy. The reports of these rat kings mainly come from European countries, and although the existence of this phenomena is for some reason debated due to the limited evidence of its natural occurrence, there are still plenty of terrifying image results any search will yield. In our number 2 spot today, we have a pilot's view in a storm. Taylor and I were on a plane this week, a few actually, so when I found out about this via watching a video, I was thankful I hadn't seen it before our flight. The view for a pilot has got to be pretty great for a lot of the job. Flying over beautiful places with incredible sights, that sounds amazing. And you know, pilots have only the best eyesight, so they're seeing it all super well. Flying at night, however, well, for pilots, I'm sure it's totally fine and normal, but when the average passenger catches a glimpse of what they are seeing, especially when the weather isn't exactly being kind, well, it was definitely enough to totally freak me out. A Google search of what a pilot sees when flying at night through a snowstorm isn't exactly a comforting sight. In fact, it's absolutely terrifying. It looks like we're traveling to another universe, not just barreling through our skies. I of course trust the pilots who have the training and the expertise, but it's just very unnerving to know what they are seeing while I'm just passed out with my neck pillow, you know? In our number 1 spot today, we have the hairy frog. Last time we talked about some weird frogs. Today we've got another kind. This frog isn't poisonous. It isn't growing eggs out of its back. These frogs simply just are hairy, and it is so unsettling. The Central African Trichobatetrachus robustus. These frogs, they're often referred to as the hairy frog or the horror frog, which I really agree with. These frogs have the unusual feature of having a thick mane of hair that is seen on their flanks and hind legs in the males of the species. According to experts, many believe that this feature is useful to the frogs because it could help them to stay underwater for longer periods of time. This proves to be extremely useful when they are tasked with guarding the female's eggs. This isn't the only weird feature of these frogs, however. Unfortunately, Frogs also have claws. These bones burst through the toes of their hind legs, and it is said that they are used in, quote, interspecific combat. This has all led to these guys receiving the nickname Wolverine Frog, which I honestly think is the most apt. Maybe they'll make an appearance in Deadpool 3. Who knows?
Are humans born evil? Or do our life experiences corrupt us into turning that way? It's a question we've been asking since the dawn of time. One thing is for sure though, humans have done some pretty despicable things. So let's take a look at some of the worst crimes in history. And we're gonna start off with Eay Sagawa. This was a notorious Japanese criminal who is known for taking lives and consuming human flesh. He's known for ending the life of Rene Hartevelt in Paris in 1981. In 83, he was deemed unfit for trial by French medical experts and was initially held in a psychiatric institution before being deported to Japan in 1984. But upon his arrival, he was ruled sane by Japanese authorities, who decided his only problem was a character anomaly, and that he did not require hospitalization. Yeah, eating people, just a little character quirk, you know? Now, unfortunately, Japanese authorities were unable to get his case files from their French counterparts, who considered the case closed, leaving Eay to walk free. Now, he made no secret of his crime and capitalized on it as he wrote a memoir entitled In the Fog, where he reminisced about the crime in vivid detail. Despite the heinous details of the homicide and his lack of remorse, Eay gained a level of celebrity and regularly gave interviews to domestic and international media in the years after his return. He displayed no apparent sign of remorse or reform, telling Vice in a 2013 interview as he looked at posters of Japanese women, "I think they would taste delicious." Yeah, thankfully he died of pneumonia in November of 2022 and can't hurt or profit off anyone ever again. Next up, we have Angela Simpson. In 2009, Angela Simpson lured Terry Neely to her home with the promise of fun bedtime activities and illicit substances. Once inside the home, though, things took a very dark turn. Angela tormented the man for over 3 days, during which time she pulled the man's teeth out of his mouth and drove a nail into his head. And even more disturbing, she did all of this while Terry was seated in front of a mirror, so he was forced to watch all this play out. On the final day of the ordeal, Angela strangled and stabbed the man more than 50 times before dismembering his body and setting his remains on fire. In April of 2012, Judge Paul McCurdy sentenced Angela to natural life in prison plus 14 years for the homicide. The additional 14 years were given to Angela for convictions of abandonment of a body and kidnapping. During a prison interview after her sentencing, she was asked if she had any regrets. She replied that she only regretted that she did not make the torment last longer. Her exact words were, "Not at all, why would I be?" During the interview, Angela said that Terry bragged to her about the number of people he'd put in jail by snitching, but the Phoenix Police Department had no record of Terry ever being an informant or telling on anyone. Still, Angela remained insistent that he was a snitch and that he got what he deserved. She also expressed that she was upset that she wasn't able to end the lives of any more snitches. Next up, we have Empress Wu. Empress Wu of China was on the throne from 690 to 705, and she was the only woman in China's history to have absolute rule. But she's not remembered in the best light. She was a cruel, merciless empress who enjoyed tormenting and ending the lives of others. Chinese history paints Empress Wu as a demonic woman who connived her way to power through homicide and deceit. In fact, historians at the time claimed that she, quote, killed her sister, butchered her elder brothers, murdered the ruler, and poisoned her mother. She is hated by gods and men alike. She's believed to have ended the lives of thousands of people. Her reign came to an end in a coup in 704. Members of her court forced her to yield power to her exiled son, Zongzong. In 705, she was in poor health and died. Her memorial tablet, which she had commissioned when she was an empress, was left purposefully blank, so future historians could compose an epitaph detailing her accomplishments, but over 1,000 years later, it still remains blank, her legacy completely unwritten. David Parker Ray. So this guy was a kidnapper, a tormentor, and suspected serial slayer, though no bodies were ever found. David was accused by his accomplices of ending the lives of several women and was suspected by the police to have ended the lives of as many as 60 women from Arizona and New Mexico while living in Elephant Butte, New Mexico. David was then convicted of kidnapping and torment in 2001. After his arrest, the police quickly obtained a warrant to search his home and trailer. What the authorities found inside the trailer shocked and disturbed them. He called the place his toy box. It contained a gynecologist-type table in the middle with a mirror mounted to the ceiling so that his victims could see the horrors delivered on them. Littering the floor were whips, chains, pulleys, straps, clamps, leg spreader bars, surgical blades, and saws. They also found diagrams on the walls showing different methods of inflicting pain. He would even play like tapes telling these women what he was about to do to them once they were kidnapped. I've heard it, it's really disturbing. He died of a heart attack about 1 year after his convictions in 2 cases, the second of which resulted in a plea deal. Next up is Bela Kiss. This was a Hungarian serial slayer who lived in the beginning of the 20th century. In 1903, Bela began plotting his horrific crimes. He would place personal ads in newspapers claiming to be a lonely widower looking for marriage under the alias Hoffman. He would use this method to correspond with women and managed to convince some of them to give him their money and assets. Then he would lure them to his house so he could strangle them to death with rope or even his bare hands. Now, not only was that disturbing, but Bela sought to preserve the bodies of his victims. Specifically, he would pickle his victims' bodies in large steel drums filled with wood alcohol, methanol, and also drain the blood from the necks of his victims, earning him the nickname the Vampire of Sinkata. He ended the lives of approximately 24 women. Tamerlane the Great. So this 14th century conqueror of Western, Central, and South Asia was known as Timur, and he considered himself to be a descendant of Genghis Khan. He took a lot of pride in it, which kind of tells you a lot about him. He was one of the most horrifying rulers in history, his rule being followed by cruelty and terror, which was responsible for destroying millions of people. He had various ways he would end people's lives, like forcing people to jump from cliffs and mountains, or getting up close and personal and just lobbing off their heads. He was also the one to order thousands of people to die of slow suffocation. He also enjoyed making towers out of human skulls. An estimated 15 to 20 million people died thanks to this lovely man. I'd also like to make a tower out of human skulls, just as long as I didn't, I wasn't responsible for their deaths. If I just found a bunch of skulls, I'd make a tower out of it, sure. In 1969, Donald Henry Gaskins began ending the lives of a series of hitchhikers he picked up while driving around the coastal highways of the American South. He would then torment and mutilate his victims. He claimed to have ended the lives of 80 to 90 people, and he was arrested in 1975. When a criminal associate confessed to police that he'd witnessed Donald ending the life of 2 young men, he was convicted of 8 homicides and was sentenced to death, which was later commuted to life imprisonment without parole. Now in prison, Donald committed another homicide by ending the life of another prisoner. He's the only man to have ever ended the life of an inmate on death row. Next up, we have Dennis Nilsen. So many people call this guy the British Jeffrey Dahmer. Kind of gives you an idea of what we're working with here. This has to be one of the creepiest criminal cases that I've ever heard in recent history. When I first heard about what this guy did, there was a lot of tossing and turning in bed that night. So Nilsen ended the lives of 15 gay men in London between 78 and 83. He'd keep the bodies around for a while, propping them up and posing them around like life-size dolls before hiding them in the floorboards and eventually flushing the remains down the toilet when they'd become a little too gnarly to keep around. Yeah, he'd flush them down the toilet. So not only was this guy completely deranged, but also incredibly stupid. Folks in the building started complaining about this awful smell, and human flesh was discovered in his sewage system. Dennis claimed he went into a trance and on 7 occasions actually freed the men rather than ending their lives because he was able to snap out of it. But the majority of his victims weren't so lucky. At one point, Dennis was rapidly running out of storage space. with half a dozen bodies hidden around his apartment. He was forced to spray his rooms twice a day to try and get rid of the flies that were hatching from the decomposing bodies. When neighbors complained about the smell, he convinced them they stemmed from structural problems with the building. Dennis was convicted in '83 of 6 counts of homicide with 2 attempted homicides and was sentenced to life in prison. Still imprisoned at Full Sutton Maximum Security Prison in Yorkshire, England, without the chance of release. Emperor Domitian was the last Roman emperor of the Flavian dynasty, and he ruled the empire for 15 years following the death of his brother Titus in 81 AD. Domitian didn't really care about his citizens at all. He was a self-indulgent man with a thirst for violence. He spent much of his time committing adultery with prostitutes, and he was also addicted to watching gladiatorial fights between women and dwarfs. But Domitian is best known for his reign of terror. After taking power away from the Senate, he became increasingly paranoid about the upper classes of Rome, as he suspected them of plotting against him. Domitian oversaw the death sentences of philosophers, senators, imperial officers, and intellectuals. He even sentenced his own cousin to death at one point. How nice. Now, since he was so paranoid, he wanted his spies to show no mercy. Under the emperor's instructions, they would chop off hands and burn genitalia in order to extract as much information as possible from their prisoners. After 3 years of slaughter, Domitian died at the hands of a Praetorian guard, and the senators of Rome did their utmost to erase his name from history. And finally, we have Pedro Rodrigues Filho. Pedro Rodrigues Filho is a Brazilian serial slayer. He was arrested in 1973 and was later convicted in 2003 for ending the lives of at least 71 people and sentenced to 128 years in prison. Committing his first homicide at the age of 14, Pedro began a series of burglaries and carried out a death spree against local criminals. By the age of 18, he'd ended the lives of 10 people. While in prison, he took the life of his own father, who was also serving time for homicide. Pedro even went on to end the lives of at least 47 inmates while in prison. His continued spree led to further convictions, increasing his sentence to 400 years. But he was later released from prison in 2007 after serving 34 years. Then he was rearrested in 2011. Following his second release in 2018, he started a YouTube channel called Pedrojino Ex Matador, commenting on modern crimes, campaigning against gang violence, and teaching the public not to be proud of criminal acts. But on March 5th of 2023, he was shot and died of his injuries. Cold cases leave you with this awful feeling in the pit of your stomach. It's this unsettling reminder that good doesn't always triumph over evil, that the world can be a cruel place and sometimes the innocent have to pay the price. Today, we're talking about some of the eeriest unsolved mysteries. We're going to start off the list with the Springfield 3. So it's June of 1992, and 2 friends, Stacy McCall and Susie Streeter, have just graduated high school. They go to their graduation party and leave at around 2:15 a.m. Their plan is to spend the night at another friend's place, Jane Kirby, and then go to a water park the next day. But Jane's place was too crowded, so they decided to sleep at Susie's mom's place. The next day, Jane and her boyfriend headed to the water park as planned. They waited around for a bit, but no sign of Susie or Stacy. Eventually, they went over to the house to see what they were up to. They knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Nothing. They didn't seem to be home, but the door was unlocked and all of their cars were parked outside. A few hours go by and then Stacy's mom, Janice, comes over to investigate. They all entered the home to discover that, there was nobody home. Even stranger than their cars still being outside, though all of their purses were still home. Even Susie and her mom Cheryl's cigarettes were still there. On top of that, there was no sign of a struggle. It was as if they just vanished into thin air. And with no leads, there wasn't much anyone could do but aimlessly search around. Until this day, the case is still a complete mystery. Next on the list is Mr. Cruel. So this case is incredibly creepy. From 1987 to 1990, there were 3 attacks made by a still unknown assailant in Melbourne, Australia. He wore a balaclava, so victims were never able to get a good look at his face. All we have to go off is this unsettling police sketch. The media soon dubbed him Mr. Cruel, and the name really fits. This guy broke into 3 family homes with the entire families present and would torment them. He'd tie the parents up and cut the phone lines before abducting the youngest of the family. You can only imagine the despicable things this guy did after that. Now, fortunately, his 3 victims would eventually be released, but Mr. Cruel was never found or even identified.
In our number 9 spot today, we have locked-in syndrome. We've all heard of sleep paralysis, but what if I told you that there was a worse, scarier version of it? Locked-in syndrome is like sleep paralysis, but the awake version. It's a condition which renders the patient completely unable to move, aside from vertical eye movements and blinking. The patient is completely conscious and aware of what is happening, and able to communicate with eye movements, but everything else is, well, locked in. The cause of this is due to damage in the lower brain and brain stem with no damage to the upper parts. This can happen from things like poisoning, a brain stem stroke, a traumatic brain injury, or a lesion of the brain stem, as well as many other factors. The scariest thing, however, is that there is an even worse version called total locked-in syndrome, where the patient isn't even able to move their eyes. Unfortunately, most people who experience this never have any significant motor function return, as there really isn't a cure. There have been people who have made a spontaneous full recovery though, so there certainly is hope. But aside from this hope, learning about this sent me down a total rabbit hole of similar conditions I had no idea about. I don't know how people get through medical school, learning about the multitude of horrifying things that could potentially happen to a person. In our number 8 spot today, we have trypophobia. This word was really coined or created back in 2005 when someone posted about it on an online forum, and although it is not an officially recognized disorder, it is possible to be diagnosed as a specific phobia in extreme cases, and it's a thing that many of us experience on some level. Basically, Wikipedia describes trypophobia as, quote, an aversion to the sight of irregular patterns or clusters of small holes or bumps. This means that a Google search of the word will have all of the worst images for someone experiencing trypophobia popping up right at the top. It's honestly so strange how something like this could make such a large number of people horrifically uncomfortable, but alas, it really does. Scientists aren't quite sure how trypophobia really developed. There's quite a limited understanding of it due to limited research, but right now the leading theory is that it is possible that it could be a bit of an evolutionary revulsion, where we as humans associate this sort of imagery with disease or poison or other danger. Well, that is pretty fascinating. I'm just warning you. The results could be nauseating. I'm like mid-level trypophobic. I feel like I experience mild discomfort seeing these images, but I know for some people it's full-blown horror. If you're a trypophobe though, you might want to skip this next point. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Suriname toad birth. Okay, so these little toads, Suriname toads, are these flat, leaf-looking amphibians from South America, and they find their home in the rainforests of the area. That is all fine. Frogs are kinda cute. That is, until it's time for these guys to reproduce. That is because during mating season, the males will deposit dozens of fertilized eggs onto the females' backs. Okay, a little unusual, not too bad. Well, until that female's skin starts to grow around these eggs like bubble wrap to keep them safe. For the next few months, the eggs develop in these little special enclosures, but once it's time for birth is where the real horror starts. These little guys eventually just erupt from the back of the mom. It's just a horrifying birthing experience. And if you have trypophobia, like we just talked about, then this is truly a worst nightmare. To anyone, this is a pretty disgusting sight, but that fear will only heighten the dramatics of this one. There are plenty of videos of this birthing process all over the internet, and while some of these videos definitely went viral, it's for all of the wrong reasons. In our number 6 spot today, we have the seahorse birth. Speaking of animals giving birth in strange ways, let's talk about the reasons why you should never Google a seahorse giving birth. I can't be the only one who is highly uncomfortable by the sight, but I'm not entirely sure why I don't like it. Seahorses are pretty cool, they're pretty cute, and generally I personally don't have a problem with them. That is, until they start shooting out kids by the dozen. There aren't many birthing processes that look like it's a fun, nice time, but this one really just looks stressful. An interesting thing about seahorse reproduction is that the males of this species are actually responsible for carrying the children. Seahorse fathers incubate their developing embryos in a pouch located on their tail. Their tail basically serves as the equivalent of a female uterus seen in mammals. When birthing time rolls around, these fathers are giving birth by basically shooting these babies out of the tail, but there's thousands thousands of them. It looks like the seahorse is having contractions or maybe something similar. Definitely not a scientist, but with every contraction, thousands of tiny little baby seahorses pop out, and while the miracle of life is a beautiful process, it also leaves me feeling really uncomfortable. Super happy for the new dad and all, just don't want to be flooded with seahorse birthing videos, personally. In our number 5 spot today, we have epidermolysis bullosa. With every part of this series, I learn about one more thing I didn't know I needed to be afraid of, and this is one of those things. This skin condition is quite a rare one, and it is one that affects the skin. It causes the skin to be extremely fragile and often blistering. These blisters can occur from the simplest things like minor injuries, even from just rubbing or scratching. There are even some more severe cases where this blistering can occur inside of the body, like on the inside of the mouth or even the inside of the stomach, which sounds so awful. This is something that is inherited, and while you normally can tell soon after birth, sometimes symptoms don't present themselves until teenage or young adult years. Symptoms include things like fragile skin that blisters easily, especially on the palms and feet, nails that are thick or unformed, scalp blistering and hair loss, skin that looks thin, and dental problems such as tooth decay. Unfortunately, there is not a cure for this skin condition, and treatment just focuses on healing present blisters and trying to prevent new ones. All in all, this sounds like a really painful thing for those who have to deal with it, and googling this term will have some really graphic and sometimes even gory photos coming up, which is exactly why it's a term that is best to stay away from when it comes to the search bar. Being informed is great. Seeing horrifying images, well, less great, for sure. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Wandering Black Hole. The James Webb Telescope is one of the most exciting space tools of all time, and it has already revealed some incredible information and photos to us in its debut year. But in order to fully feel how incredible these things are, we have to remember where we came from. The James Webb was preceded by the infamous Hubble Space Telescope. The Hubble walked so James Webb could run. Since its launch into low Earth orbit in the 1990s, this space telescope has been delivering us amazing space discoveries, and this one is a bit of a frightening one. Back in 2017, the Hubble located a black hole, which is already frightening, but this one was peculiar. That is because they found out that this one was being pulled or manipulated by gravitational waves. Basically what this means is that at some point, this black hole is going to escape its own galaxy and begin roaming the universe. Black holes are bad enough. I don't want them to start wandering around. Turns out, however, that this really is a possibility, and it's happened in more than this one instance. Googling these wandering black holes is sure to send anyone into a doomsday spin. The good news, however, is that despite this black hole weighing approximately the same as 1 billion suns as it flies through space at 5 million miles per hour, it's estimated to be about 8 billion light years from Earth, so at this point, we're pretty safe. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Amazonian giant centipede. These centipedes are the largest centipede species in the world, with the ability to grow over a foot. These gross things will prey on basically anything they can, which includes other large insects, spiders, millipedes, scorpions, even tarantulas. But because they're so huge, it also includes small lizards, frogs, snakes, mice, and even bats. They have crazy hunting techniques for the largest of their prey, and have been known to climb on the ceiling of caves in order to get the bats, which is both incredible and very scary. These things are also venomous, and while it hasn't been a common occurrence for humans to die from a bite, there is one recorded incident that took place in 2014. This incident happened in Venezuela, and a person passed away after being bitten by one of these giant centipedes after it had hidden itself in an empty soda can. There are a lot of dangerous things crawling around on the forest floor of the Amazon, but this one might take the cake on the most disgusting looking. In our number 2 spot today, we have invisible fire. A lot of these horrible searches are horrible because of the images that the search will reveal, but for this one, the issue with it is the fact that you can't see it. Invisible fires are actually ethanol fires. These are the fires that are created by alcohol, even the kinds we drink, and motor fuel as well, which is why they can be quite an issue for race car drivers and crews. Ethanol burns blue and smokeless, but these blue flames can be virtually invisible to the naked eye. This provides an incredibly huge obstacle, obviously. We now know how dangerous and deadly fires can be, so how do we fight something that is dangerous and deadly but that we can't see. It truly is one of those things that upon learning about, I suddenly developed some sort of an irrational fear over it. And that one scene in Talladega Nights makes a lot more sense now. In our number 1 spot today we have alien hand syndrome. If someone told me about this before I made this list, I would have thought that they were trying to play like a silly little trick on me, but this one really does exist. Alien hand syndrome is an eerie phenomenon that occurs when a person suddenly does not have control over their hand or any limb anymore. The hand will begin acting like it has a mind of its own, which truly is a terrifying thought. Sometimes people will find themselves in a situation where they're forced to keep the alien hand under control with the hand they thankfully still have control over, so as to ensure they don't harm themselves or anyone else. The most common factor regarding this syndrome is that the primary motor cortex, which controls the hand movement, is isolated from the premotor cortex influences, but it still remains intact and able to execute movements. All in all, this isn't like the deadliest one on this list, but it certainly is very, very creepy. And unless you want to be incredibly freaked out, I would potentially refrain from googling it. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Chordodes formosanus. Sure. This is the scientific name for a kind of horsehair worm that has its sights set on the praying mantis. This little parasite, well, not little at all actually, is a type that will pass through a variety of different hosts through its life stages. They start out their life in the guts of small insects that the praying mantis would feed on. From there, once the mantis is nice and infected, these disgusting creatures begin to grow. When the worm is sufficiently mature, it takes control over the insect's body and directs them to a body of water. It gets them to jump in, which allows this horrifying thing to swim out. These worms can grow up to 90 centimeters long, which is disgusting, and they are super dangerous to the mantis. That is because when it breaks free in order to go and reproduce itself, it leaves behind a half-empty mantis husk. A search of these guys will have videos and images of these guys coming up, including people dunking praying mantises into water and watching these wiggly guys escape. It honestly made me feel sick to my stomach, so I can't even imagine how the mantis feels. In our number 9 spot today we have blank room soup. If you've been on the internet for a while, chances are you've probably seen this video floating around. This entire thing really is just the stuff of nightmares. Basically, the video is set in a blank room and it features a man eating some kind of soup. The soup eater has his face censored and it sounds like he is crying while eating this soup, and this is all creepy enough, but there is another totally freaky thing in this video. Basically, there's a guy in dark clothing with a mascot head on who is rubbing this guy's back as he eats the soup. Soon, another guy wearing an identical outfit comes in and does the exact same thing. I realize this sounds very strange as I'm explaining it, but it truly is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. For years, rumors swirled about this video, some saying it originated on the dark web, and the guy eating soup was being held against his will, and the soup was made out of his own wife. How horrible is that? While we may have a far less sinister answer as to where this video came from, it truly still is chilling to watch. In our number 8 spot today we have vent worms under a microscope. This one is so random, I'm not even sure why you would be googling it, but if I'm being honest, you're definitely better off just not doing that. Hydrothermal vents live on the ocean floor and they are the result of tectonic activity. Through this tectonic activity, as seawater seeps downward through the oceanic crust, it gets really hot and becomes very rich in chemicals. This leads to the water becoming so buoyant that it comes back out of the surface of the sea floor, and that is what is called a hydrothermal vent. The water coming out of the vent is that same super hot, super chemically rich water, and it is an extremely important part of underwater ecosystems. The water from the vent is highly acidic and hot, while the water in the depths of the ocean is slightly basic and freezing cold. There are many different smaller species who come to the vent areas because of the chemicals in the water, as well as the heat, which helps certain types of food sources grow, which they then want to consume. One of these creatures is aptly named the vent worm. These guys are super tiny and they can't really be seen with the naked eye, and we should consider ourselves lucky for that because of what they look like under a microscope. These creatures are fully nightmare inducing with creepy hook-like teeth. I'm just glad they aren't an everyday occurrence in the ocean, cause I would never go swimming again. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Australian paralysis tick. Ticks are considered ectoparasites since they wreak havoc on their host from the outside of the body, while most other parasites need to be inside the body. There are, of course, different kinds of ticks that can transmit diseases such as Lyme disease, but in these kinds of cases, the transmission of disease is not actually the tick's goal, which is why today we are talking specifically about the Australian paralysis tick. These ticks purposefully secrete a neurotoxin that causes paralysis. Alright, definitely not good, but this can be especially dangerous depending on the different areas that the tick paralyzes, because it has the ability to paralyze something like the lungs, which of course would be a very bad situation. The good news is that once the tick is removed, the effects of the toxin should wear off completely. I thought when I get the chance to go to Australia, my only worries would be the snakes and the spiders, but I guess I'll just add this tick to the list. Safe to say these creepy crawlies are just one Google search away from sending you down a rabbit hole of the disgusting. In our number 6 spot today, we have Vandellia serosa. Vandellia serosa is a very tiny eel-like parasitic fish. Yeah, I guess this is just a parasite list now. This is what happened. I googled one of these guys and then went on a spree. That's why I'm warning you against it. These guys feed on other fish by swimming into their gills, where they then began drinking their blood, which gave them the nickname vampire fish. Vampire fish can also enter the human body through any orifice it finds. Okay? And it will drink human blood as well. They have backwards facing spines, so they will lodge themselves wherever they enter the body. After filling up on their tasty meal, they usually end up passing away there, but they are bloated from eating so much. This means that surgery will be required in order to remove it, and depending on where it ended up, this surgery has varying degrees of difficulty, if you get what I'm saying. Orifices, surgery, it's not good. In our number 5 spot today, we have the hagfish. There are about 76 different species of hagfish, and some of them are known to live as deep as 5,500 feet below the surface of the ocean. While hagfish isn't particularly the best name in the world, they are also known by the equally disgusting name of slime eels. These creatures definitely are pretty horrendous to look at, no offense to them. Rather than a mouth with a jaw, these strange-looking creatures instead just have a ring of razor-sharp teeth. Really love it. They use these teeth to burrow into the flesh of dead whales on the seafloor, and once inside, they then basically just stay there and eat their way from the inside out. That is all horrible enough, but what's worse is how they got their slimy nicknames. Basically, their body produces a sort of goop that is used to ward off predators. If they are stuck in the clutches of a terrifying predator, they release what is described as, quote, copious amounts of this slimy goop that is designed to clog the mouth or gills of said predator, which will hopefully have them releasing these little devils. Aside from this defense mechanism, if their slime doesn't work and they find themselves still caught in the grasp of a predator, they can sort of tie themselves into a knot in order to hopefully escape the clutches. All in all, a creepy, slithery little slimy creature with a ring of razors for a mouth. It's just a thing I personally would rather not search up on the web.
Alright, the Tylenol case. This incredibly disturbing case happened in 1992 in Chicago. Someone tampered with Tylenol bottles, lacing them with potassium cyanide. A young girl died, first after taking an extra strength Tylenol, then the next day, 3 members of a single family all died after consuming Tylenol from the same bottle. On top of that, 3 separate people also died that day after taking Tylenol. When it was discovered that the Janices had died as a result of Tylenol, laced with 3 times the fatal amount of cyanide, a press conference was held advising people not to take Tylenol for the time being. Eventually this led to the product being pulled, like loads of product from the shelves, and it was recalled nationwide eventually. Now we have things like pull stickers on bottles because of incidents just like this. The case really falls into that category of crime I've always found deeply unsettling. Everything on this list is very disturbing, but the idea you could just walk into a drugstore and buy something off the shelf completely unaware that it's been poisoned by some unknown creep with a sick thrill of harming other people completely at random, absolutely nightmarish. Next up, we have the case of Russell and Shirley Dermond. Russell and Shirley were an elderly couple living in Putnam County, Georgia. They lived in a very quiet, safe neighborhood. Nothing bad ever happened there. But sometime between May 1st of 2014, when they were last known to be alive, and May 4th, when they failed to show up to an event they'd planned to attend with their neighbors, the couple met a grisly end. One neighbor, growing concerned, decided to check on them. He knocked on their door and got no answer, but the door was unlocked. He eventually made a horrific discovery. Russell's decapitated body was lying in the garage, but Shirley was nowhere to be found. It wasn't until 10 days later that Shirley's body was found in a lake about 5 miles from the home. She'd suffered blunt force trauma to the head, and sadly the case was a total dead end. There were no witnesses, no evidence of a motive behind the attack, let alone a suspect, so the case remains unsolved to this day. Russell's head hasn't even been found. Next, we have the mysterious death of Robert Wan. So this is a very, very strange case. So on the night of August 2nd of 2006, Wan, who is a lawyer, was staying at the home of 3 friends, Joseph Prince, Victor Zaborski, and Dylan Ward, in Washington, D.C. That night he was supposed to sleep in a guest room, but he was found dead in the room from stab wounds. The 3 housemates called the police, claiming that an unknown intruder must have entered the house, but investigators found little evidence of any forced entry, and even stranger, there were no signs of a struggle, like as if one hadn't tried to defend himself at all. This meant he was likely incapacitated with a paralyzing agent before being stabbed. The other strange part was the lack of blood. There was none. There wasn't even any coming out of his wounds. It was such an oddly clean crime scene. Suspicion fell on Price, Zaborski, and Ward. They were later charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence, as it seemed they were not fully cooperating with the investigation. And during the trial, the defense maintained their innocence, though, arguing that Wan's death was indeed caused by some unknown intruder. In 2010, the 3 housemates were acquitted of the criminal charges. The judge noted that the prosecution had failed to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, that's a pretty infuriating way for the case to end, because obviously these 3 housemates had something to do with Wan's death. But what was the motive? That's the question. Next is the case of the Setagaya family. On the night of December 30th, 2000, in the Setagaya ward of Tokyo, the Miyazawa family, composed of Mikio Miyazawa, his wife Yasuko Miyazawa, their daughter Nina, and son Rei, died in their own home at the hands of an unknown assailant. The crime was discovered on New Year's Day when a neighbor noticed bloodstains in the window of the Miyazawa residence and contacted the police. Authorities would find the lifeless bodies of the Miyazawa family, and it had been a pretty gruesome scene. All 4 family members had been bound, beaten, and stabbed to death. And the assailant stuck around for a while after committing the act. He ate some of their food, he cruised the internet for a bit, and left without taking any valuable items. Whoever this person was, they're still out there, unless they've died since. And it's frustrating because there was so much evidence at the scene. There was DNA and fingerprints everywhere, but somehow the perpetrator has never been identified. Alright, the Brandon Swanson case. This is yet again a completely baffling case. In southwestern Minnesota in May of 2008, Brandon Swanson, a college student, suddenly went missing. On the night of May 14th, Brandon was driving home from a party. At some point he got lost and then got his car stuck in a ditch. He phoned up his father trying to give him his whereabouts. His parents drove to his whereabouts and tried flashing their headlights, but Brandon said he didn't see them. So he told his dad, you know what, I'm just gonna walk to a nearby town to get some help. He could see lights in the distance that he believed was the nearby town of Lind. Dad then stayed on the phone with him as he walked towards the town. At some point during the call though, Brandon suddenly exclaimed, "Oh sh," and then went silent. They tried to call Brandon again, thinking the call had just disconnected, but they couldn't reach him. He hasn't been seen or heard from since. Next, we have the Florence Salon case. On a cool November morning in 2001 in Florence, Montana, a customer arrived at the hair gallery salon for a scheduled appointment. What they found was the scene of a deadly crime. 3 women were dead, including Dorothy Harris, the owner of the salon, Brenda Patch, a manicurist, and Cynthia Paulus, a customer. Their throats had all been slit. Once again, There was nothing to go off here, no witnesses, no clear motive or suspect, just 3 innocent women whose lives were taken seemingly at complete random. The case of Laurie Deppes. Laurie Deppes, a 20-year-old woman, disappeared on August 19th of 1992 from Menasha, Wisconsin. On the night of her disappearance, Laurie had been working at a local photography studio and was last seen leaving her shift. She had plans to meet her boyfriend at his apartment later that evening, but never arrived. Well, she'd made it into the parking lot, but never physically into the building. People inside the apartment heard her drive up, they heard her car door shut, but that was it. She never came in. Her car was found in the parking lot of the apartment complex. A styrofoam cup of soda was on top of it, but no sign of Laurie. And she's never been found. I can't imagine how completely devastating this would be and confusing, just awful. We always think of, if my loved one is, heaven forbid, goes missing, they'll probably be when I'm not around. They'll probably be somewhere off alone. But the fact that she was right there outside the apartment, like car in the parking lot, they heard her getting out of the car and then just poof, gone. Has to be absolutely maddening. Finally though, we have the infamous Yuba County 5 case. This is one of the most mysterious cases in the United States. 5 young men in Yuba County, California disappeared in 1978. Theodore Weir, Jack Hewitt, and Gary Matthias were a group of friends, all with intellectual disabilities of some kind. They disappeared after attending a college basketball game. After the game, the men were last seen at a convenience store. They had plans to return home to Yuba County, but they never made it back. Their abandoned car was later found in a remote and mountainous area called Plumas National Forest. The car was stuck in the snow and there was no sign of the men. It was determined that they'd walked away from the car, even though the weather was very harsh. In June of 1978, there was finally a breakthrough in the case. The remains of Ted were discovered in a trailer about 19 miles from where the car had been found. There was food and supplies in the trailer. Weir had seemingly died of starvation and exposure. This was very odd because the trailer was stocked with enough food to keep all 5 men alive for quite a while, and there was stuff there to make fire and everything, but none of that had been used. Then Jack and Bill were found the following day, about 11 miles from the car. And all that was left of Bill were bones, and Jack looked to have been partially eaten by an animal. Jackie's remains were found 2 days later, and as for Gary, he was never found. So what went on here? Why did they leave so far from the car and try and stay in this trailer? Why didn't they eat the food that was there? We'll likely never know.
Google can be a great helpful tool, but sometimes you can find out the most disturbing and dark information on there. So while I rotted my brain for 2 hours researching, here's the PG list of dark things that you should never Google, and I'm warning you, be careful. So first off, we have the radioactive man. After a fateful accident in Japan's Tokamura nuclear power plant in 1999, worker Hisashi Uchi suffered immensely. When he arrived at the University of Tokyo Hospital after being exposed to the highest level of radiation of any human in history, doctors were stunned. The nuclear power plant technician had almost 0 white blood cells and thus no immune system. Soon he'd be crying blood as his skin melted. Kept in a special radiation ward to protect him from hospital-borne pathogens, the profuse amount of radiation coursing through his blood eradicated the introduced cells and skin grafts could not hold. "I can't take it anymore," he cried out, but at his family's insistence, the doctors continued their experimental treatments even as his skin began to melt from his body. Then on the 59th day in the hospital, he had a heart attack, but his family agreed that he should be resuscitated in case of death, so the doctors revived him. He'd eventually have 3 heart attacks in 1 hour. It was only a merciful final cardiac arrest due to multi-organ failure on December 21st, 1999 that released him from the pain. Now this was 83 days after the incident. I can't imagine the pain he was in and why the doctors and his family kept trying to save him. Next up, we have green boots. Climbing Mount Everest is a very dangerous thing to do, and unfortunately some people who have tried to do it have met their untimely death. As of November 2022, 310 people have died on Everest. Over 200 bodies remain on the mountain and have not been removed due to the dangerous conditions. Now, as morbid as it sounds, current climbers use these bodies as location markers, and Green Boots is one of them. Green Boots is named for the colored boot the climber was wearing, and he is a landmark on the main northeast ridge route of Mount Everest. The body has not been officially identified, but it is believed to be Swang Pajor, an Indian climber who died on Everest in 1996. All expeditions from the north side encountered the body curled in the limestone alcove cave at 27,900 feet until it was moved in 2014. Green Boots was moved to a less conspicuous location by members of a Chinese expedition. Now, in 2006, British mountaineer David Sharp was found in a hypothermic state in Green Boots cave by climber Mark Ingalls and his party. Mark continued to ascend after radioing for advice on how to help David, which he was unable to provide. Now, David died of extreme cold some hours later. Approximately 36 other climbers would have passed by the dying man that day, and it had been suggested that those who noticed him mistook him for Green Boots and therefore paid little attention. Overall, it's just super sad, but I don't know why people would risk their lives for this. Now we have the Victorian British 8 mummies. Okay, so I've seen people talk about this before on Twitter, but I've never actually delved into this topic, and well, I think I should have left it that way. They first started with the Egyptian mummy, which was crumbled into a solution to stanch internal bleeding, but other parts of the body soon followed. Skull was one common ingredient taken in powdered form to cure head ailments. Even the moss that grew over a buried skull, called usnea, became a prized additive, powder believed to cure nosebleeds and possibly epilepsy. Human fat was used to treat the outside of the body, and doctors prescribed bandages soaked in it for wounds, and rubbing fat into the skin was considered to be a remedy for gout. Blood was procured as fresh as possible, while it was still thought to contain the vitality of the body, because yes, they used the blood for more remedies. Now, thankfully, the practice dwindled in the 18th century, around the time Europeans began regularly using forks for eating and soap for bathing, but all I gotta say is ew. Moving on to Karl Tanzler. I need to tell y'all about Karl Tanzler because he is just such a truly messed up man. In 1930, Karl believed he'd found his one true love. While working as a radiologist in Florida, he met a young Cuban-American woman, Maria Elena Magaro de Hoyos. She was suffering from tuberculosis and died the next year. Karl paid for her funeral and visited her mausoleum regularly. He was obsessed with Maria. Now, in the dead of night in 1933, he took her body from the mausoleum and back to his home in a red wagon. He put her skeleton back together using coat hangers, stuffed her with rags, and made her a wig from her own hair. She was dressed and put in his bed until 7 years later, following rumors of the destruction of her body, and he was discovered by police. While her body was covered with clothes, her face was a death mask of her former self, created by Karl, and was kept in his bed after the coroner had removed the rest of her body. Now, unbelievably, the statute of limitations had expired, and Karl's case was dismissed out of court, but yeah, there is just so much wrong with that, I am just speechless. Now we have the chainsaw invention. In 1780, 2 Scottish doctors invented the prototype of the chainsaw. Now, this wasn't cutting down trees or anything, oh no. John Atkin and James Jeffrey invented the hand-cranked chainsaw to cut through the pelvises of delivering mothers who were having trouble pushing their babies out. And to make things worse, mothers were completely conscious throughout the entire process. Now, that just hurts to think about. Now, those women were just so strong. Now, after seeing how well it worked out in the delivery room, well, that is according to the male doctors, the machine was then co-opted to saw through wood and other materials, gradually growing in size to become the chainsaw we know today. Now, thank God we've made more advancements when it comes to giving birth, because just wow. Then there's the brain-eating parasite. Naegleria fowleri is a free-living amoeba that is so small that it can only be seen with a microscope. It is commonly found in warm fresh water such as lakes, rivers, and hot springs, and soil. Now, the parasite infects people when the water containing the amoeba enters the body through the nose. This typically happens when people go swimming, diving, or when they put their head under fresh water. The amoeba then travels up the nose to the brain, where it destroys the brain tissue and causes a devastating infection that is almost always fatal. Now, the first symptoms usually start about 5 days after infection, infection, but they can start within 1 to 12 days. Symptoms may include headache, fever, nausea, or vomiting. Later symptoms can include stiff neck, confusion, lack of attention to people and surroundings, seizures, hallucinations, and coma. After symptoms start, the disease progresses rapidly and usually causes death within about 5 days, but the death can happen within 1 to 18 days. Yeah, remind me to never swim in freshwater again. The Highway of Tears. The Highway of Tears is a 447-mile long corridor of Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert in British Columbia, Canada, which has been the location of crimes against missing and dead Indigenous women. Accounts vary as to the exact number of victims, but according to the RCMP Project EPANA, the number of victims is fewer than 18, while Indigenous organizations estimate that the number is higher than 40. In 2015, the federal government launched a national inquiry into the cases. That year, Carolyn Bennett, now a federal minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Canada, claimed that the national number of victims in Canada is likely over 1,200, which is just insane, and it's disgusting that no one really seems to care about these women and girls. Now, the region of the Highway of Tears is characterized by poverty and, until 2017, lacked adequate public transportation, which forced many locals to resort to hitchhiking as a form of transit. Now, this directly resulted in some of the deaths and disappearances. Some activists argue that institutional racism and sexism have affected the searches for these Indigenous women, and we just need to put more resources into these disappearances. Now we have burn degrees. We've all heard of first, second, and third degree burns, right? Well, what if I told you there also existed 4th, 5th, and 6th degree burns? But wait, isn't 3rd degree burns considered the worst? Apparently no. 4th degree burns occur when heat damage destroys the dermis and muscle tissue is affected. Like 3rd degree burns, 4th degree burns result in scarring and the loss of keratin, loss of hair shafts and fingernails and toenails. 5th degree burns happen when all the skin and subcutaneous tissues are destroyed, exposing muscle. These burns can be fatal due to damage to major arteries and veins. 5th degree burn injuries also may require amputation due to the damage to the muscles. Permanent and prominent scarring with the loss of keratin in the area of the burn will also occur. 6th degree burns occur when the heat destroys the muscles, charring and exposing the bone. These bones are almost always fatal, and just saying that gives me goosebumps. That's absolutely horrible. And while researching this topic, I made the right decision by not looking up any photos related to this, so be like me and please don't look at them. Up next, we have Richard Chase. Richard Chase was a disturbed man, and in 1976, he was involuntarily committed to a mental institution when he was taken to a hospital after injecting rabbit's blood into his veins. Now, while there, he broke the necks of 2 birds he caught and drank their blood. Chase was then diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and after undergoing treatments, he was deemed no longer a danger to society, and later that year, he was released into his mother's custody. But just a year later, he claimed the life of his first victim. 2 weeks after the first death, he attempted to enter the home of a woman, but because her doors were locked, he walked away. Chase later told detectives that he took locked doors as a sign that he was not welcome, but unlocked doors were an invitation to come inside. Sir? Okay. Now, he ended the lives of more people, eating their organs and other body parts and drinking their blood. He eventually was caught and arrested, and police who searched his apartment found that the walls, floor, ceiling, refrigerator, and all of his eating and drinking utensils were soaked in blood. He was eventually found guilty of 6 counts of first-degree homicide, and the jury rejected the argument that he was not guilty by reason of insanity and sentenced him to death. And lastly, we have the Lake Nyos disaster. On August 21st, 1986, farmers living near Lake Nyos heard rumbling. At the same time, a frothy spray shot hundreds of feet out of the lake, and a white cloud formed over the water. From the ground, the cloud grew 328 feet tall and flowed across the land. When farmers near the lake left their houses to investigate the noise, they lost consciousness. The heavy cloud sunk into the valley, and people in the affected areas collapsed. Over the next 2 days, people from the surrounding areas entered the valley to find the bodies of humans and cows lying on the ground. By August 23rd, the cloud had mostly blown away, and scientists soon learned that the cloud contained carbon dioxide, CO2. Now, when the CO2 concentration was 15% or less, people lost consciousness and later revived, but individuals who had inhaled more than 15% of CO2 stopped breathing within minutes and died. Scientists determined that the CO2 had been trapped at the bottom of Lake Nyos for a long time and then erupted. Now, Now in the end, 1,746 people and 3,500 livestock died.